Boston, there's only one. So I wanted to do this video to open up a discussion in the running community. Big announcement, big news is that Boston has changed the time standards to enter their race for the 2026 edition, right? You're already looking to qualify for Boston for 2026. The window for next April 2025 is already closed. Truth be told, full disclaimer here, I have actually applied to enter the Boston Marathon for next April in 2025, but we're talking about the 2026 standards. And so this caused a lot of discussion within the running community, road running community, but also people that maybe do any service, any distance that cross over into trail races. And then the difference is kind of with the dynamic of ultra trail run marathon races and entry into exclusive events, so to speak. And so I kind of wanted to touch on that video, but if we look at the standards in the news on the website here, I'll pull them up in a second here. You see that they were generally lowered for most time age ranges, and they do it by age ranging, which I think is good because it allows for diversity of different age groups, right? So as you get older, the times are slower, but you're also getting older. So, if you're over 50 years old or 60 years old, of course, it's not expected that you should be running, low 3 hours or even a sub 3 hour marathon. Whereas people, 20 to 40 year age range, which is probably the most applied or the most sought after demographic, I'd say, at least for males, probably guys in their 30s and 40s, it's very competitive and you still have to run fast. Now, the problem with these time standards, and I'll pull them up on the B-roll there, is that it's not like the OTQ standard that I'm used to chasing. And, truth be told, I've had the great privilege and honor of being in Boston a number of times over the last 12 years. And it's been a race that I realize is very special to a lot of people. It's kind of like what Western States 100 is for ultra trail runners in the US or even worldwide. That's kind of like what the Boston Marathon is if you're a road runner in the US, but also worldwide because it's part of the majors. There's a coveted history to it. There's a prestige to it. The history is really cool. The course is challenging. The people in the community that come out, it's very special, right? You could have adverse weather. It's New England toughness, right? And so the history, that draws a lot of people in. But I think because it's exclusive, so to speak, and because the time standards are hard to get into, it makes it more desirable, or there's, you want what you can't have, so to speak, right? So if something's hard and, it's worthwhile fighting for, it's something that is more rewarding when you actually do get in somehow, especially if it's like you've been waiting for years or it's a lifelong dream. And I think, I can't relate so much to the BQ time standards, but I can relate to chasing after the OTQ standard, or the US Olympic Trials Marathon standard, which I started dreaming about when I was in high school. It had been a lifelong dream of mine to qualify for the US Olympic Trials, and that was a very cut and dry time. Back then, when I first qualified, it was 2:22. You had to run a sub 2:22 on a certified course, more on that later. And then when I qualified again in 2012, it got lowered to 2:19. So again, a similar thing. They lowered the standard, they made it harder. This was still before super shoes. Eventually they lowered it to sub 2:18. And eventually I also missed in 2016 and 2020 by a matter of seconds, right? I missed by 12 seconds ultimately in the 2016 trials. It would have been my third one, and I missed by 52 seconds in the 2020 trials. But when I first qualified, it was a matter of qualifying by 17 seconds to spare. And in my first marathon at Houston, when I was in college, I actually missed the standard by about 21 seconds. So I know what it's like to chase after a goal over decades and have it be a lifelong dream, and to either make it or not make it by a matter of seconds. Maybe it's a matter of a couple minutes for you. The ambiguity I see and the problem with the Boston time is that if you hit the time, whether it's 3:05 or 3:30, you're not guaranteed entry. And I think that's one of the biggest problems here, is it's this sliding scale where we don't know if you have to run 1 minute faster or 3 minutes or 5 minutes faster than the published time. You won't know if you're accepted or get in. And I think that's kind of a disservice, because I think as soon as you cross the finish line in your qualifying race and you're under that time, you should automatically know that you're in the Boston Marathon, because I do realize they have caps on the field size and all that, but That's one thing that I can't relate to, because the OTQ was if you run under the time, and mind you, we used to have to go by gun time for the OTQ standards. It was kind of hard. If you didn't get to that starting line within a couple seconds, you were losing time already. So gun time, and it was also, and this is a big point of this whole talk, it was also on certified marathon courses. You can't have a massively downhill course, for example. So OTQ standards were on courses like Boston, which, it's technically a net downhill, but it's a hard course. There's rolling uphills, right? CIM, there's still rolling uphills at CIM or Grandma's Marathon, or where I set my PR, San Diego Rock and Roll. Yeah, it was a net downhill. It dropped about 300 feet, 400 feet, like 120 meters. And it wasn't a smooth downhill. There were a lot of uphill kickers. There actually could be, quite a bit of climbing in there. I think Boston is close to almost 1,000 feet of climbing or 300 meters of climbing. Could be a little less than that. But the Newton Hills are no joke. It basically makes it harder than a purely flat course, right? If you want to time trial a fast time on a legal flat course, it would be, Chicago, London, Berlin, something that's nice and flat. So Houston, and good weather conditions. So the other thing that there was a lot of buzz and discussion I got involved in is what should be considered, your PR, or what maybe they shouldn't accept courses that are massively, massively smooth downhills. And so far, Boston actually always has accepted some of these revel races. That's just one category where they drop off these mountains, maybe 2,000, 3,000 feet of a gradual downhill gradient. And you comment below if you think those courses should be legal or not. They definitely are not legal for U.S. Olympic trials qualifying, or in my opinion, people say, oh, I got this PR, and then you find out it was on this massively downhill course. I'm not sure if you should equate that to flat running times. And in the track world, running 5Ks, 10Ks, and your mile PR, you would never run a massively downhill course, especially if it had a tailwind, and say that that was your legit PR. If you look at STRAVA GAP, grade adjusted paces, thinking of the physics of it, downhill running is obviously quite a bit faster at the same pace and heart rate. It's way less power. Now, there are some unique challenges to very downhill races where if you don't do some downhill quad pounding training, if you don't pace yourself really well, you could go way too fast and blow out your quads. And I think a lot of people, when they first qualify for Boston, they go out too fast. It's exciting. There's a massively downhill at Boston. The first 5K is very downhill. Even the first half is pretty downhill. People set their half marathon PR or come through way too fast. They're going 20 seconds a mile, 15 seconds a kilometer, way too fast, and they blow out their legs. So there are challenges with big downhill courses, but when I say net downhill, I'm talking about those revel races and the big course drops where it's a matter of like -3% grade all the way smooth downhill, or -5% grade, like massively downhill courses. Whereas people are like, wow, Boston's downhill. Well, Boston's a hard course, especially if the weather's bad. There's been some years at Boston where if the weather's perfect and you have a really good tailwind and you're trained for the hills and you're a good uphill runner as well, you could run a really fast time at Boston. Don't get me wrong. Same thing with CIM. CIM's definitely a fast course. It's nice and smooth, but it's only a matter of a couple hundred feet of actual net downhill, not thousands of feet. So that's kind of the big difference, I'd say, there. And then, with other entry processes, people were discussing this online. And again, comment below. Let's foster a good, productive discussion. We don't want to get too negative or do any name calling or blaming here, so keep it civil in the comments below. I really would like to hear what more people are thinking in the marathon running community, ultra trail running community. There's overlap because there's a lot of people like me that do both types of events, but there's also concepts or themes of bringing in more diversity. What is fair? Realizing fair and putting that in quotes, a subjective type of thing, right? Equity versus, equity, what's equitable, and what keeps prestige and what keeps a race. I wouldn't say it's elitist. It might be catering for elites, right? The Olympics caters to elite athletes. The Olympic trials is a lot of elite athletes. Boston is a lot of really, really fast runners, and some of them worked really hard for it. Some of them were probably really genetically gifted, right? And not gonna lie, like I definitely have some natural running ability, natural talent. I've had to work extremely hard to run some of the times I've had to run, and it got harder after my health issues, but I don't think people realize, like, I put in a good well, years of 100-mile plus weeks, 160K training weeks. And then there's a good 5-year span where I actually averaged 90 miles a week for 5 consecutive years, including time off, illness, vacation, 0 mileage weeks. I still averaged over 90 miles a week for 5 consecutive weeks in there, or years in there. So it was a lot of high mileage hard work, and a lot of people that qualify for Boston who get the time standards do have to work extremely hard. It's very hard to hit the Boston times or run a sub 3 hour marathon without running more than 50 miles a week, 80K a week for the vast majority of people. If you're super talented, of course, you could walk out the door and run the time. But for our BQ marathon plan at Higher Running, like, people have to run 60 miles, 100K a week. Some people run 100 miles a week. Some people will never get those times. I'm not going to lie. Like, they're very fast times. It's a very ambitious goal. Qualifying for an auto time on New York is also quite fast. Some of the Japanese marathon majors, I believe, you have to run even much faster to get an automatic entry in. And then, with London, something like that, I applied to be a sub elite at London with a 2:16 PR and was totally rejected one year. So for me, getting into London is way, way harder than getting into Boston, where I could actually bank on that guarantee of hitting that qualifying time with a big cushion. So there's that. But is it fair if someone's done Boston over and over and over, whereas someone who is a first-time qualifier, should they have priority over the veteran, so to speak, the veteran who's done it for 10 years? And, I know a lot of people in both boats. I know a lot of people that have done these crazy Boston streaks and they go there every year, and I think it's awesome. I know people that it's their lifelong goal and they finally hit it, and it's first time they want to go to Boston. And they should get in. I think that's awesome as well. I will say, from a financial standpoint, Boston's a very expensive type of race to do. It's not just the entry fees, it's the hotels there during race weekend, the price gouging, the transportation's always hard, but like flying there, if you're flying from around the world or flying from anywhere outside of New England, you're spending a lot of money to do this one marathon race. And I realize financially, socioeconomic backgrounds, it caters to people that are generally more wealthy, who have financial means, right? The whole sport of running, I would say, caters to people with more free time and financial means, because it's an expensive sport. It's not as expensive as like skiing or golf or stuff like that, but it's not. There is a financial barrier to entry, and I think in terms of bringing in more diversity in the sport and being fair, it's worth recognizing that. It's also worth recognizing bringing in new blood. So there's different ways to get into Boston, and there's still the charity entries, which some people could debate. I'm not going to talk about it because this video is already getting too long there, but there are other avenues of getting in, and I do realize the charity process is a big event or a big thing in some of the other majors or some of the other races, or even something like not Western States, but like UTMB, I'd say. But it's interesting to me to see this dynamic and this crossover where ultra trail runners, some people or other people that just run for fitness, maybe you don't care at all. You're like, Boston, whatever, it's overrated. I don't want to go after the time goal. I know I could hit it. I don't want to. I don't want to put a label on myself that I'm a BQ qualifier or not. I don't need to do these big marquee events because they're crowded. It's going to be crowded if you're doing Boston or UTMB. I'll tell you that right now. They're hyped up. I like smaller races. I like local races. I don't want to spend all the money on travel. And I get that. It's great to support local grassroots, small community organizations. It's also fun to do the big marquee events like Boston or New York or UTMB. So, I've had great experiences in all those things. And I think it's really important that you find what's satisfying to you in the sport and what helps grow the sport. But I think there is a certain responsibility when looking at these big races like Boston or in the ultra trail world like UTMB or even a Western States, and seeing how we could try to make everything better for runners and give people more opportunities and empower you to get more health and enjoyment out of the sport and happiness ultimately, because we just want to be happy. We're all on the same team. So realize, in a competitive environment, things are cutthroat. So, the new standards, whether they're good or bad, I don't know. Discuss it below. Let me know what you think with that time standard. Let me know if you think there should be a lottery maybe to get into Boston, or a lottery that's weighted maybe against people that have done it a bunch to move over and let in first timers. I don't know. I'm not going to state my opinion on that. I'd like to hear from the community. It's a similar thing, I think, in ultras, though, with lotteries that, if you look at something like Western States or a Hard Rock, it's a very, very small field size, right? Hard Rock's like 140 runners. Western States is like less than 400 runners, right? Really, really small field size caps, really, really hard lotteries where you might have to wait 8 or 10 years just to get in, and you've run the qualifiers. The Hard Rock lotteries, so to speak, I think are a little bit slanted because they favor veterans or people who have done it more and more over newbies. So then you're limiting diversity and fresh blood into a race like Hard Rock, which would be very hard to get into. Likewise, Western States, there's different ways that people get in through sponsorship entries. I've never used those. People blamed me for saying, oh, Sage, you took the easy way in. I did not. I got a golden ticket for Western States. I actually turned down 2 golden tickets before I finally accepted my golden ticket that I won when I won Black Canyon in 2016. Just full disclaimer there. Same thing with getting into, Boston or something like that. Like, obviously, I run the time, and I will hope to see you there in April of 2025. I got some more any service, any distance running vlogs and training series, a training series with my upcoming goals. That's plural. Very ambitious stuff. I'm ramping up my training on Strava if you follow me at Sage Canaday. Again, plug here, check out our Boston Higher Running training program. We've gotten a lot of people to sub 3, but also BQ qualifiers in those different time ranges, as well as beginner marathon plans, 50K, 100K plans, 100-mile options with the trail ultra plans, as well as a lot of 5K, 10K, and half marathon training plans, any service, any distance, on higherrunning.com. Give us a follow. We have a free newsletter with free tips. Check out Sandy's channel, Running Wild, as well as thanks to title sponsor Hoka, keeping the dream alive, as well as the Patreon supporters for keeping this channel alive. Again, comment below with your thoughts on this topic. Keep it civil. I'm really interested in hearing the discussion because I honestly don't know how a lot of you are exactly feeling or thinking, but really appreciate all your support. Hope you're doing well, and stay tuned for more VO2 Max Productions.